Pastor Perry, how did you start out in your ministry?
To be honest, it was a vision of somebody else. I did not at the beginning because I had a proclivity for science and I wanted to be someone else other than just a pastor. But the overriding influence of the prayer of a mother and her desire and her vision of the Lord's mission to all the world made her pray to the Lord, as did Hannah, that I would be the minister of the family and that I would take up where she left off. It's almost like a relay. And she said, when I die, I must have someone preaching the gospel.
For all the years that we've worked together, either directly or indirectly, which is most of my working life now, he has been the father figure around which there was a lot of playfulness, but he set the boundaries and we had to live within those boundaries. So
tremendous powers of observation. He used to have a nickname for me, which was Evangelist, you know. So I would come to a meeting and he'd have that deep booming, you know, Jamaican voice, Evangelist, you know, and I could never escape him.
There were days when he would just come into my office, sit down and say, well, Paul, how's it going? And we would sit and chat. We would sit and chat about our dreams for the church here in the British Isles. We'd sit and mull over a few of the difficult situations, and he would always say, God's with us. And that was just really special.
One of my fondest memories was a few years ago when I was a pastor in the North England Conference. I had an important event at my church in Preston, and I had the presidents, Pastor Francis, Pastor McFarlane and Pastor Perry. And it was my privilege to have them come to my house for lunch. We were all sitting around the dining table, you know, waiting to be served, and Pastor Perry was very relaxed, for want of a better phrase, very relaxed. And we were talking and talking away, and of course his eyes were closed at this time. And all of a sudden, he would interject a comment. And I looked at him quite surprised, and he looked back at me with a smile and said, you thought I was sleeping, didn't you? And then he said, no, I was just resting my eyes.
Well, I first started working with Pastor Perry when Pastor Hamilton was asked to go to the TED, and then he came into the ministerial department. Pastor Perry is a very warm person. He has a lovely sense of humour, and we'd had many a time when we would be laughing about different things. He was always had time to speak to people, and on occasions he would go round to see how the secretaries were, just to check up to see if they were happy and things like that.
Well, it's not any different from anybody's husband and father. And if I couldn't manage with them without him, you know, I couldn't. Oh, if they didn't have such a strong, happy father and a wise father, you know, they wouldn't be where they are today. And he's a praying father. And when they were little, when we go down to have a worship and we're going to pray, Cheryl and Christopher and Paul, his back, they would use his back as as a donkey. Yes, yes. As soon as he went out to pray, they're riding on his back. Yes.
So I remember Pastor Perry arriving from Jamaica and become the pastor at the Brixton Church. So I was in London when he was instrumental in negotiating the move from the church where they were on Ferndale Road to where they are now on Tintern Street, and being there and watching him galvanize the congregation to fix up that big church that we now know as the Brixton Church. But I've seen him up on ladders, painting, leading the congregation in motivating them to get that building to be ready for them to move in and occupy. A fantastic move, and I think he's, you know, I've seen him as a great leader of men and women.
He's one of those pastors who, although he spent a long time in administration, never stopped being a pastor. And that's great to have been part of.
And you know, I remember we had a committee. It was early in my ministry, and it was at Newbold College, and all the pastors from around the union. Now, I turned up late because I was doing evangelism, I think, and I would have thought, okay, Pastor Perry surely wouldn't notice that I was not there for the start. And he came out and he said, "Evangelist, I didn't see you at the opening ceremony." And I really don't know how he does it. He just has, and I thought it was just me, but then I spoke to some of my other colleagues who were a little late, and he noticed everyone. Powers of observation, incredible.
The early days when I would walk to the South England Conference, Pastor Perry would have to drop off his children at the school, and you'd be walking along and a car would come flying out of a side street. You know, and this was Pastor Perry in his blue Peugeot getting to worship. He had to be there on time, and somehow he made it. He was always there, and the rest of us knew we had to be there too.
As union president, there were times he would just talk to me about what it meant. He would talk to me about how lonely it could be, but that we actually have a great support from above. And that has been an effect that really has helped stabilise me and being able to work for the church in the sort of roles that I've had to do in recent years. Without him, I think I'd have struggled at times.